A wife becomes the man of the house after enduring a lot of torment. A woman, Celine, walks to the living room to pick up her car key to go to work. Her husband, Brian, appears behind her and questions where she's going. She says she has a management meeting by 7 and she is the secretary. He asks if the work has more priority over his breakfast. She says she already instructed the maid to serve him breakfast. He says if he had wanted a maid, he would not have married her. He asks her to prepare his breakfast before he loses his temper. She begs him that she cannot afford to be late and that this meeting is very important to her. He asks if the meeting is more important than their marriage. She says she did not mean that and begs that he be reasonable. This infuriates him and he asks if she thinks he's being unreasonable. He charges at her and hits her. He asks her to go make him breakfast. Their maid, Esther, asks Celine why she's still in the marriage. Celine tells her to leave and go do other house chores. Celine prepares noodles with fried eggs and serves him. He asks her to open the plate and throws the meal at her. He says he wants jollof rice. The woman pleads that she will be late for work, but he holds her by the neck and pushes her into the kitchen to prepare jollof rice for him. Celine says if she does not leave for work in 30 minutes, she will lose her job. She asks Esther to go to her room and bring her black suit for her. He leaves to go have a bath while the food is cooking. He meets Esther in the room and asks if she wants something. She says she's here to clean. The man enters the bathroom while Esther opens the wardrobe for the suit. She takes it and runs to give Celine in the backyard, who runs off to work. While running, she meets an acquaintance who offers to give her a ride back and she accepts. Brian comes back and calls Celine, but she does not answer. Instead, Esther comes out and says her madam has gone to work. This infuriates Brian. He calls Celine and insults her. She tries to explain, but he would not listen. Her guy friend asks her if she is having issues with her marriage or if her husband hits her. She does not answer and asks that he drops her off. He gives her his card, asks her to take care of herself and zooms off. Brian is talking to his friend as he talks about Celine's behavior and disrespect. His friend tries to make him see that there is nothing wrong in what Celine did. He says he should have let Celine go to work while he gets himself something to eat. But Brian thinks it is complete disrespect. He changes the subject by asking that they go for a drink. Celine gets to work and she's offered a sack letter. The company had already given her various queries, but now they have to let her go. She begs and says her job is the only source of happiness she has and she just needs to sort out her family issues. She's asked to leave the work premises as time is not of the essence. She gets back and tells Celine that she has been sacked from work and she might not get a job elsewhere. Wherever she wants to get a job, they will always have to refer to her former workplace. A honk is heard at the gate and Celine and Esther get tensed. Esther goes to open the gate for Brian. He gets down from his car and instructs Esther to let him know when Celine gets back. Esther tells him that Celine is back. He dashes in anger and starts to hit her again. He drags her outside and asks that she kneels with her 2 hands up. Esther comes to sympathize with her madam. Celine asks for water, but before Esther could give it to her, Brian catches her, collects the water and drinks it. He pours the rest on the floor and storms out. At night, in bed, Celine wakes Brian up and tells him she lost her job. He says it is a good thing as he never wanted her to work. He kisses her and asks that they make love. She says she's not in the mood and wet enough. He says He says he will make her wet. He pulls her into the bathroom and pours water on her. He says she is wet now. He drags her to bed and forces himself on her. Celine is outside the room with Esther. Esther tells her that a man who beats his wife is no man. Celine says she loves her husband and Esther tells her love does not bring pain. She tells her all the characteristics of love. True love. Celine says to love is to endure pain, but Esther begs to differ. She tells Celine the story of her sister and her own personal story. Celine asks Esther to go help her boil some water. Brian tells his friend about Celine's job and the friend is surprised. He says every man wants their wife to work, but Brian is preventing his from working. Brian says when a woman has a successful career, she feels she is too big and starts to disrespect her husband. He says he is man enough to take care of his house. They continue to talk over drinks. Celine is called to work by her boss. He says he has been observing her closely and notices that she has been having issues with her marriage and he wants to propose a solution. He says he recently got divorced and hopes she can leave her husband for him. Where all these men, all that their audacity from, should really be studied. Celine refuses and says she loves her husband and they are happily married. He says if she cannot accept his offer, then there is nothing he can do for her. Celine is walking home and did not even notice a car come behind her. The driver shouted at her, but she did not move. Her acquaintance finds and stops to help her. She starts to cry. He asks if everything is okay. She cries that she's tired and just wants to die. She tells him about her job and he offers to help her against her husband. She asks how and he asks her to trust him. Brian gets back from home and asks Esther to call Celine. Esther says Celine is not home. He asks where she went to and Esther lies that she went to the market to buy foodstuff and toiletries. He calls her number and it says switched off. He calls Esther and confirms if Celine did go to the market. Esther says yes. He keeps calling and the number continues to say switched off. This angers Brian a lot. While still talking with her friend, Celine notices how much time has passed and asks her friend to drop her off close to home. home. Esther is tiptoeing to open the gate for Celine, but Brian stops her halfway. He collects the key and opens the door himself. As soon as Celine enters the compound, he falls down and starts to hit her. He pulls her by the leg into the house and drags her into the room. He asks her to strip naked before him, which she did. He gives her the Holy Bible and asks her to swear that she has not been with another man since they got married. She refuses. He slaps her and she does what he asks. After that, he asks her to freshen up so they could make love. The next day, Brian is dressing up. He says he would be away for 2 weeks and says he must not see Celine outside the house. He says if she needs anything outside, she should ask Esther to go get it for her. He asks if she has heard him. She does not answer and he dashes out of the kitchen. He comes back with a pack of bread and shoves it in Celine's mouth to choke her. When he gets downstairs, he gives Esther 50,000 naira to monitor Celine for him and tell him her every movement and call. Celine sees him off and locks the gate for him. Baba no knows in a giveaway he don't do. Esther goes to tell Celine what Brian did. Celine says she needs to go out. She tells Esther to tell Brian that she had locked herself in her room and refuses to come out. She dresses up and leaves the house. Celine meets up with her guy friend at the gym who introduces her to someone who will teach her the act of self-defense. She gets acquainted with the guy and they begin to work with little workout sessions. She continues with the workout and ignores her ringing phone. Brian is calling and is angry that she's not picking his calls. He threatens to kill her when he gets back and continues to call. He calls Esther, who tells him that Celine is sleeping upstairs and has left her phone to charge downstairs. He says Esther should call him when she wakes. Celine comes back late at night and Esther says she was worried about her. She tells her about Brian's continuous calls and Celine says she's going to call him and Esther should get her something light to eat. Celine calls Brian and he shouts at her, asking why she did not pick his calls. He says next time he calls and she does not pick, he's going to kill her. He asks her not to let it happen again. Celine is straining and she remembers all the pain, the torment, the torture she had received from Brian and hits the punching bag harder. She breaks down and cries. She practices some punching exercises with her instructor. Brian calls Celine and she does not pick again. Her male friend brings the phone to her and asks that she picks it up. She picks it up after he insists and drops the call immediately. This infuriates Brian and he wonders if she hung up on him. He calls back a couple of times and the number says switched off. He is more angry and he keeps trying on and on. He swears that he's going to kill her. Celine's friend asks why she did that. She said she's trying to get him frustrated, so he lets his guard down and he's vulnerable. The friend commends her for being smart. Celine did a few laps and trains at night with her instructor. He pins her and says holding on to anger does not help. It is like a cancer that eats you up deep inside. You should not fight when angry, but instead when calm and composed. She listens to him and is able to pin him down. He says she's ready. Brian comes home the next day. Celine is waiting for him at the entrance of the house. He comes down from the vehicle, pulls off his wristwatch and drops it on top of the car. He moves to hit her, but she holds his hand. He moves the other one, she holds it and pushes him away. He gets up to fight her and they end up in a fist fight. Celine beats Brian and drags him by his leg into the house to make food for her. He gets to the kitchen and is confused about what is going on. He serves her jollof rice after a few hours. She throws the food at him and says she wants swallow. He gets into the kitchen and calls his friend that some hoodlums are attacking him. Celine comes to the kitchen and takes the phone away from him. Brian makes the swallow and Celine asks that he sits with her to eat. He says he's not hungry, but she bullies him to sit with her and eat. They hear a knock at the door and Brian says he will go get it. Celine asks him to sit while Esther goes to check. Brian's friend has come to check in on Brian because of the call he received. Esther and Celine say nothing is wrong, but Brian insists on going with his friend. After the friend leaves, Celine hits Brian and drags him into the room. She says she wants to make love, but Brian says he's not in the mood. Celine says she would get him in the mood. She goes outside and asks Esther to get her a drug from the pharmacy. Celine gets back into the room and Brian charges at her with a rod to hit her, but fortunately she dodges it. Esther arrives with the drug and Celine forces it down Brian's throat. He has a convulsion and Celine rushes to call Esther to come and help. By the time they got back into the room, Brian had already left. He runs to his friend's house. His friend did not believe all Brian says because he knows Brian to be the one who hits his wife and not the other way around. He says women have their elasticity and Celine has reached her own limit. He asks him to go and fix his marriage and remind his wife of the man she married and fell in love with. Brian gets back home that night, kneels before his wife and apologizes for the way he has treated her in the past. He tells her his mother killed his father, how she made his life miserable and he swore never to let a woman treat him like that. Celine assures him that she's not like his mother and he apologizes to her too. He teases her that he needs her help to collect money from someone. He asks that they go inside to make up. When inside the room, Celine tells Brian about a miscarriage she had. Brian apologizes and said he will make amends. Celine says everything is fine and now they can make more babies. Love is pain. Sure. Love had to endure all sorts of hardship for it to flourish, sure, but domestic violence is never one of the things love should endure. This movie teaches that we should not let our trauma define us. We should be the person we want other people to be. It is available on YouTube, and what a watch.